If you want to deliver exceptional customer service, there are just a handful of things that you need to get right. I'm going to cover about 10 of them today in this podcast episode. I want to start off with the first one that isn't necessarily obvious for a lot of people, and that is truly understanding your client's needs. So most people think that they understand their client's needs when they see an RFP or an RFQ or whatever it may be, right? They think that they understand the needs. But if you haven't talked to them, there's probably some underlying things that you're not getting from that. Now, you may not be able to have an in-depth conversation right away with a new prospect or a potential client or something along those lines. But as you get to know them, you need to deeply understand what's going in their organization. Not just why is this RFP coming out, but why is it coming out now? What problems does it solve? How is this impacting you? What are you trying to accomplish with this? Like, you have to get in there and actually understand and ask questions so that you get a sense of how you can best help your customers. So understanding the client's real needs, not just understanding the specs in an RFP, is really, really important. And the more you understand the client and their challenges, the better off you are going to be when it comes to communicating those in RFPs and queues and different things like that. You're going to be better at even just communicating on the current contracts you have and things like that. So understanding clients' needs, that's number one. Number two, I can't stress this one enough: clear communication. When somebody asks you a question and they're a customer, you shouldn't just say something like yes and then return the email. Give them some details around what you're doing and be very specific. You need to be very specific about what you're trying to communicate. If you are vague about what's going on, you will have challenges. Here's a really good example of this. We've been watching MasterChef over the last few months, and there's one of their challenges that we despise, where they put people in teams of two and they put a wall between the teams. And the goal of the challenge is not just to produce a really good meal, but to get them to communicate. And in almost every single challenge, people fail to communicate the easiest thing about the challenge: the plate that they're putting the food on. Somebody last night in an episode we were watching, somebody said, it's the silver one. And one person got a bowl, one person got a plate. One person got a bowl with silver around the ring. One of them got a plate that was totally silver. They could have said, it's the white bowl with the silver ring around it. Is there any other characteristics? And they didn't. They didn't bring up any other characteristics. But many people get that wrong because they're not clearly communicating all of the details. When a customer asks you why something went wrong, or a customer asks you for more information about something, that's an indication that either they feel like they haven't been told everything or they need more details. Anytime you communicate with details. Get very granular about what you're talking to them about, and that will help. So clear communication is a really important factor. The next one on my list is quality assurance. I can't tell you how often I will hear a client that says, oh, I gave this to the client and they kicked it back for this reason and that reason. And then we did it again and there was this problem and that problem. Or we're sending something to a teaming partner and they're mad at us because we did this. I hear that all the time. And it's simply because there's not a good quality assurance process in place in your company. If you're having things kicked back, or worse, if you're not having things kicked back and then you just lose a recompete or a customer doesn't buy from you again, there's usually a quality issue with that. Most people can't be bothered to tell you what you did wrong. They just won't buy from you again. They'll just move on to somebody else. So if that's a challenge in your business, in the commercial part of your business, if you have a lot of one-time buyers that should be repeat buyers, but they're not, there's usually a quality issue. The other issue could be that you're not putting yourself in front of them enough. Again, I've been watching a lot of restaurant shows and I like to cook, and so that happens a lot. There's a restaurant guy, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he was talking about how it takes 3 visits in order to keep a restaurant customer. And that's why when they do their referral programs, it's a 3-trip thing. The first one is 50% off an appetizer, and the second one may be 50% off an entree, and the third one may be a free dessert or whatever it is, right? Their goal is within a 10 to 15 day range, at the max 20-day range, to get you in the restaurant 3 times. Because if they can get you in the restaurant 3 times, the likelihood of you being a repeating customer for life skyrockets. That's where they focus. When they're doing that, they have little steps in place to make sure the quality on those people in those 3 visits is exceptional. Now, I would argue it should always be exceptional, but their point is we have to go above and beyond our high standards because we have to ensure that people come back. We went to a restaurant this weekend and it was so poor that even when they gave us a discount, even when they took things off of our bill because they were wrong, they literally had 5 things that we ordered and all 5 were wrong. And all 5 took over an hour, right? Even with them taking 50% off the bill and giving us a gift card, we're like, we're not coming. We'll throw the gift card away if we can't use it at another restaurant. We just will. We're just not going to come back because the experience was so bad. Quality assurance is one of those things. Oh, and by the way, just to recap on that story, we were all very polite, said, hey, I get it. I understand. Appreciate you being nice to us, all that. We never once said, I will not be back. We just won't be back. And that's what most people do. Most people just don't go back. So quality assurance is a big one. Number 4 on my list is responsiveness. I don't understand how people go days, sometimes weeks, without responding to an email or a phone call from their customer. I just flat out don't understand it. With us, I try to respond as quickly as possible. And you're like, what does that mean, Mike? 2 to 4 hours? No, I mean as quickly as possible. So if I'm not doing anything and one of my customers, one of my federal access members at any different level shoots me an email about something that they need, I try to answer it then and there. And you may say, well, that's not productive. You should only be answering emails twice a day or whatever it is. If I'm free and one of my customers needs something, I'm responding. That's the way it is. Before I go to bed at night, as long as it's in a reasonable amount of time, I'm going to respond to every single customer email. So if I had a really, really busy day and somebody sent me something at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, before I go to bed, they're going to get a response. The only exception to that is the weekends and holidays. That's the only exception. I may not be able to get to the email because I'm at a conference or whatever, and I will still email them and say, hey, I'm at a conference. It's crazy day. Let me do a little bit of research. I'll get back to you in the next 2-3 days, whatever it is, but I give them a response. Now, if somebody emails me and it's 8 o'clock at night, they're getting a response the next morning. That's usually how that is. But being responsive, there's just no excuse for not doing it. Let me put it that way. You've got to be responsive. The next one is flexibility and adaptability. I have, over my career, built part of my brand around that, where if something needs to change, and I'll give you a good example of that. If something needs to change, I will make the change. I do not like having calls on Mondays and Fridays. Last week, I had a client who hopped on a coaching call on a Thursday. He was in his car and I was like, hey, the internet connection's not very good. There's some things I need to share on the screen. Let's book this tomorrow. Let's just move this tomorrow. I don't care that I don't like having calls on Friday. I want you to get everything out of this coaching call today. And so being flexible and adaptable to the situations is critical. Now, I didn't see this coming, but that client was like, man, I always had a bar here for you, and you doing that took the bar to here for me because I just respect that. I was like, I really appreciate you saying that. That's pretty awesome, man. But for me, it's just one of those things where just because you have a plan doesn't mean you have to stick to the plan if it interferes with your customers. There are some things that do. Like, I'm not going to work a Saturday or Sunday just because somebody gave me something at the last minute that they could have given me a month ago. I'm just not. I'll say, hey, I'll get to this on Monday. I'll get to it on Tuesday, whatever it is, right? There's some things that I won't do like that. But a lot of times you can make an exception for somebody and you can do something. Or when somebody says, hey, we thought the project was going this direction, to the right, to the left, or whatever it may be. Now that we are a couple of months in, we need to adjust course because this is not shaping up to be what I thought. Or, hey, there's been a change in policy. There's been a change in cybersecurity. There's been COVID. There's been fill in the blank, right? And you just have to be able to adapt. And for me, it's an easy yes. It's like, if I can do it, I will. That's just the bottom line. So flexibility and adaptability are big factors in customer service. The next one is really important to me. It's proactive problem solving. Like not just waiting for the client to give you their problems. I'll say one of the most common ones is in shipping or acceptance or delivery or billing. Those are easy things that usually those are things that you can spot. They have some sort of trigger, some sort of warning. So like I'll get billing issues with clients in our system and be able to reach out. Like somebody thought they canceled their account a while back, but they actually canceled their other account. They had two accounts. And so there was some billing. And when I saw the billing come through, I'm like, wait a minute, this person canceled. Oh, they had two accounts. So I proactively reached out and said, hey, I just saw this. And just so you know, I've already issued a refund. That's proactive problem solving. When you're dealing with things in your business, you may have an issue where, let's say you have an employee on site and that employee has been with you, been with the customer for 3 years out of a 5-year contract. All of a sudden, that employee has something happen in their life and they quit. They just quit. Instead of waiting for the customer to call you and ask you how you're going to deal with it, the first thing you need to do Monday morning or the very next day after you find that out is you need to be reaching out to that customer and saying, hey, Susan just quit. She's having something going on in her life. Won't get into it, but we're going to find you a replacement. Here's what our plan is. If you let that sit for a day or two while you're trying to figure it out, your customer is not going to appreciate that. They're going to be like, man, it's 2 days in a row. Where's Susan at? Where's Susan been? And you have to give them all the information. This goes back to the clear communication, right? You can't just say, hey, Susan's not going to be in the office this week. You just can't do that. You got to give them the truth. What happened? Like Susan quit, just abruptly quit, and we've got to deal with it. And here's our plan to deal with it. So I do recommend before you actually get on the phone, you have a plan, but you can simply email them and say, hey, I'm going to give you a call today. Need to talk to you about Susan. What does your schedule look like? And then you can hammer it out from there. Okay. Even if you don't have a full plan in place, you can tell them the process you're going to follow to get the plan in place. And that is something they're going to appreciate. So proactive problem solving is one of my favorite ones. The next one is professionalism and integrity. These are just simple things. If the customer site has a dress code, if their Zoom calls have a dress code, abide by it. If their parking lot has some sort of rules, abide by it. Don't park in the VIP spots, and things like that. Don't do things that are petty and tick people off. Have integrity when it comes to conversations you have. You don't share information you're not supposed. Hey, Steve, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but our competitor's making this big mistake, and I happen to know that they are going to go into bankruptcy next month. That is not your business to tell them. You need to have some personal integrity and not have that discussion. Should you be prepared for it? Absolutely. Should you be ready to have a discussion once it's in the open? Absolutely. But you've got to have some professionalism and integrity, which leads me into this next one. You have to have high internal corporate standards. If the standards of the company are not high and they aren't clearly communicated with your employees will have their own standards. So you have to communicate what those standards are to your employees. Part of those internal standards are about your training, your competencies, but also your professionalism, your integrity, your code of conduct, all of those things. So having a high internal corporate standard and communicating, and I have to say this, enforcing it with your employees is really, really important. Number 9 on my list, having some sort of feedback mechanisms. When your company is on a contract and your customer complains, when your customer praises you, when your customer does anything, how are you working that back into the business? If it's something that needs corrective action, how are you working it in? You've got to be working that in to making those changes. Maybe there's an issue with billing, and it's the 3rd month in a row that you've had an issue with billing. Customers told you about it. Well, there's a breakdown in your system about getting that feedback and getting it to the right person in the company. And you've got to fix that. The other part of it is on the front end, asking for the feedback. Just like I said earlier with the restaurant, a lot of people can't be bothered to tell you what's wrong. They just can't. They'll just scream when there's a problem. So for you, periodically checking in with your customers, say, hey, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What could we fix? What could we make better? Just asking questions so you can get the feedback and put it back in your system. Now, should you be doing that on a monthly basis? Probably not. But once or twice a year, it's a healthy thing to do. Hey, last time we met, you said we were doing these 3-4 things right. Is that still the case? You made these suggestions. We made the changes. Have you seen that on your end? Has that been implemented to your satisfaction? That sort of thing. So having those feedback mechanisms so you can learn and grow and better understand your clients will help you perform, will help them want to do more business with you. My last thing here is something that a lot of people aren't very good at, but it's really, really simple. Taking detailed notes. Take detailed notes on everything there is to know about your customer, from their likes and dislikes. Hey, they like the Braves. They hate the Braves. They love the Yankees. They're, big Patriots fans. They are country music fans and their favorite singers, Eric Church or Chris Stapleton or whoever it is, right? Their favorite hobby is biking. Their favorite hobby is mountain climbing. Their favorite hobby is playing jazz. Whatever it is, right? When you're having conversation, take notes about stuff like that. This client has 3 kids. He has 2 daughters. One of them's in college. One of them's going to Tennessee. One of them's going to Kentucky. Taking those notes so that when you have conversations, or more importantly, as your team grows and gets bigger, the team is aware of those kind of things. Because it's not just about their likes and dislikes. It's, hey, Steve really likes his reports in a certain format from me. They like an email from us by the 5th of every single month with this information in it. They like their billing done a certain way. Their parking lot is awkward, and it's very easy to get a ticket in their parking lot if you park on the first or second floor of the garage or in these blue colored spaces or whatever it is, right? There are simple notes that you can take that will help your team. Like with the parking garage one, before somebody goes on site, if this is one of the situations where you're not always on site, but you occasionally go on site and you're sending a new employee over there, they could review the notes and they could have something pinned in your CRM that just says, beware of garage issues for on-site visitor, or a note that is for first-time visit to this site, important things to know. And there's 9 things that are important to know about that site, about how you're going to get your clearance there, or how to get in the gate, or how to get in the building, or what documentation you need to bring, or whatever it is. Because I guarantee you, if your employee shows up on site for something important with a client and they can't get in because you didn't take notes and tell them what they needed, and now the meeting's got to get rescheduled because they've got to drive home and drive back, and they're in the DC area, and that's going to be a 4-hour drive with traffic this time of day, your customer's going to be ticked off. They're going to be ticked off. They're going to be impressed when every time you have a new employee come on site, they always have their documentation. They always park in the right place. They always know all the little details that you had in those notes. They're going to be very impressed with that. Like, man, you're the only contractor that always hits this out of the park. So those are just a handful of things that I think are really important to do in order to deliver exceptional customer service. There's a lot of other things, but these are 10 core things that you can do to improve your customer service with your government client. If you have any questions, as always, reach out. Love to chat with you about this. See you next time. I really hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to the podcast and screenshot it and tag me on LinkedIn or whatever social media you use. So thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.